In the last video, we spoke about how we would create our own custom boilerplate project that's going to aid us in developing, testing, and deploying our contracts. Again, Remix is great, but it's really limited to the browser. Chances are you're going to eventually want to use your own code editor, and chances are you're going to eventually want to use version control, like say Git, to manage the contracts that you write. So, although Remix is great, the fact that it only runs in the browser is a little bit of a constraint. So instead, we're going to make our own custom project. This custom project is going to have a couple of big issues that we're going to have to tackle tied to it. So I've laid out some of the big issues and possible solutions for each of them. The first thing that we need to be able to do inside of our boilerplate project that we're going to put together is to make sure that you and I can actually write some Solidity code that can then be accessed in some fashion from the JavaScript side of our project. Remember, everything we do in this course is going to be JavaScript themed. So I want to be able to write some JavaScript code to test my project, to deploy my contract, and to eventually work with my contract after it has been deployed. It's all JavaScript. However, we are writing Solidity contracts. In order to get a bridge between the Solidity side of our contract and then somehow interact with it from the JavaScript side, we're going to need to set up that Solidity compiler. And remember, we've been saying that the Solidity compiler spits out an ABI that we use to work with JavaScript, and the actual bytecode, which is what gets deployed to the network. So we're going to make sure that the Solidity compiler spits out both those different pieces so we can both deploy our project and actually work with it from the JavaScript side. The next big challenge that we need to be aware of is the fact that so far we've had a fantastic testing tool in the form of Remix. So we've been writing some contract code. We could then deploy that contract to a local virtual network that's running inside of our browser, and then we can click buttons very easily to run some of the different functions that are tied to that contract. Now that's all great. That's a very manual testing process. It's very visual and it's pretty easy to get started with. But chances are, as we start to develop more complex contracts, we're going to eventually want to have some set of automated tests that will execute and make sure that our contract is working the way we expect. Remember, these contracts can control an amazing amount of real money, very, very real money. So we need to be 100% positive that before we deploy our contract, we have something that is working the way we expect. In order to set up a testing pipeline inside of our project, we're going to be making use of the Mocha test library. Mocha is a very generic and general testing library that gets used with all types of JavaScript projects. If you've never worked with Mocha before, don't sweat it. It's actually going to be a great experience that's going to teach us a lot about how to interact with Ethereum contracts from JavaScript code. So setting up this test runner right here to test our contract is really going to be a lot of very great and important experience that we gain in this course. Finally, our boilerplate project needs some way to take our compiled contract, so the actual bytecode, and deploy it to a public network. And that might be the main network, it might be Ropsten, it might be Rinkeby, just some public network. And we're going to set up our project to do that in an automated fashion. For this, we're going to create a little script that is going to both compile, so we're going to run the Solidity compiler, our contract, and then take that outputted bytecode and somehow deploy it to the network. Now this might sound like I'm just kind of restating the problem here. I'm not really giving us a very clear solution here, but trust me, when we get to this step, all things will be made clear, and we're going to have a very specific and well-tested solution for deploying our contract. So this is the goal. This is what we're going to tackle inside of our boilerplate project. Now for the very last step, before we get started, we're going to flip back over to our terminal, and we're going to generate a new project that we can work with. So I'm going to flip back over to my terminal over here. I'm going to create a new project directory, and that's where we're going to place all the code that's going to work with our contract, compile, deploy, all this stuff. So on my terminal, I'm going to make a new directory, and we'll call it, how about simply inbox? And then we'll change into inbox, and then finally we will generate a new node project by running the command npm init. We'll see a couple pop-ups here asking us for some information. For right now, there's really not any extra information we need to enter, so I'm just going to hit enter a few times. And eventually we end up with something that says, is this okay? And we get kicked back to the command line. And now we should see a new package.json file inside this new directory. Great. So let's continue in the next video. We're going to start to install a couple of dependencies and also set up some pipeline to automatically compile our code. So I'll see you in just a minute.